from what influenza has done to an industry, I think this is just one tool. So vaccines, I think influenza will continue to be a challenge for our industry. And as we see more variants coming out and changes, I don't think it's something that will go away. And so we need to look at tools. And I know ASV does a lot of work looking into different ways how to come up with systems, different ways, different vaccine technologies that are out there. I think it will continue to evolve, and we need to stay up to date with those different strains, viruses, and options for control.
Welcome to the Swine at Canada podcast show, brought to you by Wisenetics. We are dedicated to bringing you the latest insights and discussions in the Canadian pork industry. So my name is Miranda Smith, and I'll be the host for today's episode. And today's guest is Kevin Vilaca, who is a veterinarian and partner of Southwest Vets in Stratford, Ontario. So welcome to the show, Kevin.
Thank you very much for having me. I look forward to it.
Yeah, so today we're going to talk about the regional vaccine for swine flu that you developed. But before we get started on that, can you first give us a little bit of a background in how you got to where you are today?
Sure. I guess I'm a veterinarian. Went to the University of Guelph. I did my Bachelor of Science, then did my master's in epidemiology with Dr. Kate Dewey and Bob Friendship. And then they convinced me somewhere along the way that you should go to vet school because you like pigs so much. So that led me to finish my master's as well as start vet school. And so in 2002, I defended my thesis on the effects of PRRS virus on boar semen. And then 2 years later, graduated, went into mixed practice for a couple of years, but pigs were where I really wanted to be. And then 2006 till now, I've been practicing veterinarian strictly in swine, and now I'm a partner at Southwest Vets. We're a 14 vet practice in Ontario. We do some consulting to other provinces as well. And then, specifically to this topic would be influenza started to become over the years more and more of a problematic disease that sort of caught my attention. And I'd say it's an interest or a frustration, a bit of both, but that sort of led me to influenza as an area that I wanted to pay more attention to.
Swine Veterinary Partners comprises 4 well-established clinics across Canada: Precision Veterinary Services, Premier SHP, Demeter, Ontario, and Demeter, Quebec.
Okay. So can you tell us a little bit about, before you decided to create a regional vaccine, what were you doing to kind of battle swine flu?
Yeah, great question. Influenza had been around. It seemed as if, at least locally for Ontario, about 2005, we started getting some more strains that started showing up. And although influenza had been there, we started getting into, now we know more on tracking that there's actually more variability that started showing up. And we started getting real problems and really didn't have great solutions. Initially, we'd start using some of the commercial vaccines and they would work for a period of time and then we'd lose efficacy. And then we sort of evolved to a point where we started leaning more on, autogenous vaccines as commercial vaccines weren't giving us coverage. And so that got us to the point where we started getting some comfort with regional vaccines. With some of the autogenous vaccines. What then really got the project going, where we ended up doing for regional flu, is really, I'll remember the day because I was sitting at a farm table and we were going through and we'd found another strain. It was our third time and we were going to be updating our herd specific vaccine. And, it was there's got to be a better way. Like we keep, chasing it as opposed to being proactive. And over the next little bit, it sort of got me spending some time doing research on, okay, what other options are there? And I just around that time got my own, human influenza vaccine on a seasonal and thought, well, here's a marvel, that if we look at it, has had such a great impact on the human public health side of things. Could we do the same thing? Could we identify what are the main viruses and try to predict it? And so I'd like to say, be proactive with disease control as opposed to trying to be, chasing it down all the time and reactive to where it is. And that really got the project going. Started speaking to some various experts in the fields, and that got us heading towards can we do it, and what are the barriers for us to get through to do that?
So, just for my own understanding, because I'm not really into like diseases and immunology, etc. So, autogenous vaccines, that's where you use like the whatever viruses on that specific farm. Is that right?
Yeah, so traditionally, the autogenous platforms are, you would go out to a farm, you would do your diagnostics, you would find the strains that are on that farm, send them to a lab. They would make up, with some surveillance on the farm, they would make up a herd-specific vaccine. That would take months to develop. Then you would put it in, and then you would see downstream impacts. And that was primarily, herd-specific for that herd. So even if I knew that the neighbor had a different strain, our rules are that we can't use a vaccine that isn't isolated from that specific farm. And hence, it's a reactive approach. And so that led to, until I get it, I can't be preventative. And that was sort of the stumbling block that we got to, which is there's got to be a better way where we can be proactive. We know what's in the area. We have an idea of what's in the area. Can't we do something about that and slow it down or stop it or add some protection to reduce the clinical signs?
Okay, so and who have you been working with then to get the regional vaccine developed?
Yeah, so this started in 2016. There's a local lab around here called Gallant Labs. And the previous owner there that started going, her name was Jackie Gallant, and she was making our autogenous vaccines. And I was chatting with Jack and saying, same thing, like, what else can we do? Where are the limitations? So we actually took a trip to Saskatoon and met with Dr. Susan Detmer, who's does a lot of research with influenza here in Canada. And that sort of started it could be, we could put into something where if we were to get a framework within the government that would allow us to change this and allow us to still get a licensed product, get a product that can be used, go through all the safeties that need animal testing, can we put something in place, but that we can modify the strains and update them as necessary? Because that's the challenge with the commercial vaccines, is they couldn't adjust to the local area. So those probably would have been some of the key people. And then more locally, we worked with the provincial government, so that would be OMAFRA, and a sequence database. We started into a influenza sequence database, and that's really started the basis. So in order to have a good program, you've got to have an idea of what's around. And so with that sequence database, we could then actually do surveillance on what are the strains, what is their prevalence, and then with that be able to select out specific strains that we may want to include. And then the last step is going and actually getting it approved by, which is CFIA, the Canadian Food Inspection Agency, and they regulate vaccines. And so go through with them on what is that process and what do we need to satisfy to get that done. And, that's this project would have started, that would have been 2016. And it took us to 2019 before we were able to get our first, vaccine available that was a multivalent influenza strain that was a protective vaccine that we could offer into the system as a preventative.
So this vaccine has been around now for about 6 years then?
Yes.
Okay.
August 2019, we got our first doses.
Okay, so in those 6 years, have you seen how the use of this vaccine has affected the flu and the pigs? And
you bet. So I guess I'd back up and say, where we were primarily targeting it is, yes, there's a sow herd influence when a sow herd breaks with influenza, but most of our long-term challenges were actually coming from downstream flow. So that would have been primarily nurseries. So we would see most of our challenges were recirculation or circulation at nursery level. And so that was where we wanted to target the impact. But we knew quite early on well, our best way of doing that is we've got to stabilize our sow barns. And so starting with gilts and sows on a pre-farrow basis, could we vaccinate those animals and then have them pass on good maternal antibodies through colostrum management, still biosecurity, all those other things? Could we influence the downstream production as our main goal? Knowing that maternal antibodies will wear off at some point, but at least get them through that neonatal critical time of the weaning process, the stresses, vaccinations, get them through that then if they did have to deal with a circulating virus, that then they could handle it a lot better as a bigger animal. And that was where, with herd specific vaccines, we'd seen the benefits to that. This was just hopefully trying to cover off for what else would float in.
And did you see any changes?
So yeah, and that's it. So we've done some, because that's a question everyone will ask. We've actually followed as we've put different versions and we've updated it a few times. We'll actually take systems where they weren't using it, start using it, and we track nursery performance and on feed conversion, average daily gain, mortality. And then the one that I always like to throw in is antibiotic use. Like the reduction in antibiotic use, particularly with the pressures that we're getting, really by adding that stability to our downstream flow, we used less of it. We didn't stop it. We didn't stop all antibiotic use, but the reductions were significant. And then all the other parameters came along. We didn't take mortality to nothing, but again, the significant reductions that producers, now it's become a staple for those that, we've got some very hog dense areas around us where the viruses, your neighbor could have it, the other one couldn't. So influenza is something we would deal with on a regular basis. Some less hog dense areas maybe wouldn't have the same pressures, but where we are in southwestern Ontario, there's quite a lot of hog pressure just by facilities.
And so you mentioned that you've changed the vaccine now a few times in the past 6 years. Is that right?
Yes. So we've done 3 updates. We're working on a 4th one right now. And that's been based off of surveillance. So again, I'd say one of the key points to the vaccine and its efficacy is the surveillance. So I think if you just go in and you pick a few and you don't have a lot of background, you're not as dynamic on knowing what's going on in the industry. So our practice does about 80% of the swine production in Ontario. So we've got a good demographic of data. We have our veterinarians and some of our production staff collecting when they see animals with clinical signs. And so that all feeds into the surveillance program, which then allows us to watch any changes, or as we're coming around, track, okay, this is drifting off. What do we end up doing? How do we handle it? And then we do our updates. And I think that comes back to where our challenges historically, if I go back 15 years with some of the commercial vaccines, when they first came out, they were quite good. But then over time, as the viruses would drift, we'd lose that efficacy that we were seeing early on. And so this allows us to adapt and modify what we're seeing with a true surveillance program and then update it as we need. And that is the model, which is the human model. Really, I'd love to say it's a new idea, but it's been working for humans where that is exactly it. You have labs across the world looking and searching. They get together once, twice a year, assess what they predict to be the next ones. And that's what goes into that year's version of the seasonal flu. We're just doing the same thing, except instead of it being different labs, we're just got a good active surveillance program that feeds into any changes that are going on.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. So have you seen any early detection of new strains through this surveillance program?
You bet. It's from an industry point of view where we seem to end up having, lots of bad news stories. It's nice to have a good news story. And this would be one where I'd say, so 2 years ago, we would have identified, and because, for the viruses that come in, most of them, all of them will come across my desk. So, at the end of the day, go through, see what's come through. And there was a strain that had been identified in the US. It's one of the most prevalent ones in the US. So we're aware of it, but hadn't been found in Canada. And all of a sudden, we got our first case. And then it was in late spring. So we got a few cases early, in late spring, and then it sort of settled down. But right away, we're going, okay, this is accelerating in and the geography wasn't in a small cluster. It was sort of sporadic across the province. And so it's here. It's been identified. So notified, the other provinces, just letting them know there's a few other veterinarians and researchers interested in influenza saying, hey, here, this is now here, heads up for your regions. But at the same time, applied to CFIA, sent them the data and said, here is a new virus. We're actually fortunate that it's at the end of spring, so we're heading into a better time of year. But I'd like to have something up and ready for the fall so that we could do a fall vaccination as usually our flu season ramps up. And so we were able to identify early detection of a new strain. We're able to apply, get that added into our vaccine, do the testing that was required ahead of time, the safeties, the immunology behind it. And I think it was end of September, we were able to get our first doses with that for what ended up being, and now today is one of our predominant strains of influenza that would show up. So it did show up, but the clinical impact, early clinical impact, and I've done some presentations on it, was more severe. The later clinical impacts, I think, if we did identify it, were in vaccinated systems or partially vaccinated systems and had a significant reduction. And although we did find it, it is now total influenza cases from that year on have now tapered off again to a significant degree. So we were able to get herd protection that would have covered the animals so that the massive impacts that we had on the first cases, we didn't see that in subsequent cases when we did identify.
Well, that's a great good news story.
And just on that, even our distribution, our impacts of where we would find it was usually finishers. And so when we did the distribution of early cases were in sow barns, as we moved on and got into the winter, we didn't see our clinical issues in sow barns. It was downstream. So it was actually finishers, and our nurseries, we got some protection from it. So again, where we were able to get good vaccination in place, we saw a significant benefit.
So do you ever use the vaccine in grow finish or not really?
Yes. So it's a question. So rarely. So our challenge, I think, as everyone else has been, how do you get a vaccine, have maternally derived antibodies that don't interfere with vaccine and get the timing in? So they got good antibodies from mom. It's passed off in the colostrum. At some point, various animals will start losing that immunity in the nursery. Where do you time what is a killed vaccine? So it requires 2 doses. It's very hard to get that in. With that said, we've got specific situations, and it's not many because it adds a significant cost, but where we've got large continuous flow finishing barns that can't empty, and so they have a circulating virus that's there. And when naive animals to that specific strain enter, so we're fortunate that the nurseries are all in, all out, we can run those well, but they go in as naive animals. And in those situations, we're able to test the animals, see when their titers are dropping off, position our first and second dose in, so they've got some protection going into those finishers. And that's had significant benefit. But I will caution that those are very rare situations where I know the status. I know I'm starting with the naive animal. I know where I'm at. I think in the right settings, yes, it can be used. Those are small. Those are specific situations. And cost becomes the other part to it as you start adding cost into a vaccine and labor to have to vaccinate them twice. It hasn't been a big adoption, but we've gotten the control we want. I'd still like it more, don't get me wrong, but we'd still like better all the way through. But it was really our nurseries that would really beat us up.
Mm-hmm. And so in the gilts and sows, like at what point do you vaccinate them?
So there's variable programs. So most of it would be set up where we would have a gilts. Gilts are vaccinated twice. They get their first and second priming dose. And then they would get it on a pre-farrow basis. So 3 weeks pre-farrow, with the goal that we would booster antibodies that could then be taken into mammary tissue and put into colostrum and elevate those for the piglets. So yes, the sows are protected, but we want to maximize those antibodies that'll go in colostrum to protect the piglets for as long as possible. Now, with some of the loose sow housing systems that we've put in place, we'd like to do it as a pre-farrow basis. It's a little harder to do so in large pen settings. We've had to go to some of those where they're doing blitzes, 2 to 3 times a year to try to achieve that heightened level of antibodies. So if we're able to do it on a pre-farrow basis, that would be the preference. Otherwise, we do also use it as maintain it in gilts and then do an ongoing blitz of the sow barns.
Okay, that makes sense. So where do you see the future going with this vaccine?
I think it will continue. The benefits to this or any other vaccine is the ability to modify and change and adapt as it goes through. Another province in Canada, in Quebec, they've started a regional program mirrored on this one. And similar thing where they are going in, they've got a monitoring program. And I think there are some regional differences between what strains they have, similar to the US on some of the presentations I've seen. There are differences, and there's some crossover, but there are regional differences that I would look at it and go, if there's a coordination that can be done that will allow for a regional approach that can be preventative. So based on very good surveillance, whether it's just updating changes as viruses drift or identifying a new virus. Quebec had the benefit of knowing that this strain was around. They were prepared. They knew it was coming. So once they got challenged, they knew what to do and they were expecting it. So it's getting a heads up is really nice. But I think you will get into more and more regional approaches, but it'll take coordination and a good surveillance program that does ongoing monitoring to then see, has something new showed up or where do we drift? And so I would see as we get more and more pressure put on us from reduction in antibiotics, that as an industry, different regions, different systems, and some of the systems do that already. But even if you just took a geographical area and said, what are the systems or barns affected in this area? Is there a collaboration on what strains they're getting or moving between? You might be able to prevent or reduce the impact of a neighboring virus that you don't have right now, but could float in on the next upcoming season.
And so just so I understand it correctly, like the vaccine that you've developed, is that only available for producers that you and like your group provides, or are there other vets who can use this as well?
So the way our rules in Canada work is that it's done with the vet-client-patient relationship. So the ones that we do is for within our clinic and our client base. So I can't sell outside of that. So that's a legislative thing. Within Quebec, they were able to do it on a provincial level. So there they collaborated and got all of the provincial veterinarians. So there they sell it. It's actually administered by the province. So they own the vaccine and then sell it to the different vet clinics. So I think if people are creative, they can come up with different ways to get access to different vaccines.
Interesting. So do you see that changing, that eventually also in Ontario and maybe other provinces, it can be on a provincial level rather than per vet clinic?
I think it definitely could, and it would lead to some better collaboration on an industry basis. So I think you bet, and I think that's where the regions come in differently, different regions, and it's going to be who administers it and who actually does the monitoring and selections that go on. And I think that's probably where the hindrance is where do you get a group that wants to take on a project like this to administer it?
Yeah.
And so I don't think there's a one size fits all. And I'd actually, encourage different regions to not get caught into, well, we can't do it because of this. It's saying, okay, well, what can you do to make it better than what it currently is? If we can reduce the footprint or reduce the clinical impact on an industry basis, well, that's better than what it was. And then keep moving forward on, what else can we move in advance to get a more collaborative approach? Again, that one size fits all, I don't think will fit in, and it'll be the people in specific areas that are motivated that will probably drive that decision making.
Okay, perfect. So is there anything else that you would like to share today?
I'd say from what influenza has done to an industry, I think this is just one tool. So vaccines, I think influenza will continue to be a challenge for our industry. And as we see more variants coming out and changes, I don't think it's something that will go away. And so we need to look at tools. And I know ASV does a lot of work looking into different ways how to come up with systems, different ways, different vaccine technologies that are out there. I think it will continue to evolve, and we need to stay up to date with those different strains, viruses, and options for control.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
It's time for our famous three.
So to our listeners, if you're enjoying this episode of the Swine at Canada podcast show presented by Vicenetics, please remember to like, subscribe, and share it with colleagues, friends, and family. So then we always ask our guests the same last three questions. So the first one is, what is your favorite swine-related book or resource?
Yeah, and I do a lot of reading, so I'd still say when I'm, from a clinical point of view, when it's not influenza or something else, Diseases of Swine is probably, and lots are probably in the same boat. It stays quite current, it's updated, and reminds you of some of the details that you need. So I'd say that would be it. And then JSHAP, the journal, would probably be the next one that, look forward when that one comes out to read the next rounds of what comes out.
Okay, perfect. Like the book, I get that one a lot.
Yep, exactly. It's a staple.
Yes. Okay, and then what is your favorite book or resource outside of agriculture?
Yeah, so I'm not a fiction reader or anything else. I love to fly fish. I tie my own flies and things like that. So recently I've been reading a book on brown trout fly fishing in New Zealand, and it's got beautiful pictures. So on my I want to go at some point, it's New Zealand to go fly fishing for brown trout up in the mountains. So it's non-fictional, but it's more a hobby passion.
Well, that sounds great. Can I come with you?
It's beautiful in New Zealand.
It's on my to-see list as well, New Zealand. So, okay, and then the last question is, in your opinion, what sets successful swine professionals apart from those that are not?
Yeah, and I was thinking about this one, and actually it wasn't too hard for it. Passion, I think, if you look at it, and I put passion and enthusiasm in it. I think especially when we've got young vets in our practice, if there's passion and they're really interested in something, well, then it comes easy and it's not work. You enjoy it, you're excited. And then that's that enthusiasm. When you speak to someone that they really like what they're doing, you can tell, they're excited about it, they're interested in it. And it may not be an area that you're interested in, but I say, find your passion, find what you really enjoy doing. And then the rest comes easy because, and especially in veterinary medicine, there's so many options. Just be passionate. And you can tell from people, presentations, things like that, if there's that passion there.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I really like that one. Thank you. Okay, so that concludes another episode of the Swine at Canada podcast show presented by Vicenetics. So thanks, Kevin, for joining us today.
Thank you.
And thanks everyone else for joining us. So this is Miranda Smith from the Swine at Canada podcast show signing off. Until next time.
Thank you.